On to rugby league and continuing our honestly, guys, it's just our opinion theme for the next couple of weeks. It's time for our Bulldogs preview. Just quickly, you had the Tigers at 17th. I had the Dragons at... Sorry, you had the Tigers at 17th. I had them at 15th. You had the Dragons at 14th very nicely. I have them at 17th. And today's preview is the Bulldogs.
Yes.
So your team, they're the most player movement in the league.
Yes. John, what I did was, I know you've taken some very detailed notes there on the Bulldogs. I've actually gone through and done a predicted round one team for the Bulldogs. I'll just read it out and then I might get your thoughts on what I've put together. So, John, I've got Stephen Crichton at fullback.
Yep.
I've got Josh Adokar and Jacob Carraz on the wings. I've got Matt Burton and Connor Tracy in the centres. In my halves, I've got Drew Hutchison and Toby Sexton, mainly because I couldn't find any other options, John. Not really because I want them to be there, but you can only work with what you've got, right?
Yep.
In the front row, Max King, he averaged 107 run metres and 36 tackles a game last season, John. So I've got him in the front row. I've got Josh Curran as my other front row, obviously Reid Marnie at hooker. The back row, I've got Jacob Preston, Viliami Kickout and Kurt Mann. Hopefully we get a lot more of Viliami Kickout this season after injury just plagued him last season, John. On the bench, Blake Taff, Samuel Hughes, Jamin Salmon and Liam Knight. So that's 6 new recruits in their 17-man squad that I've got there. They were 7 wins, 17 losses last year. So, I've got Burton in the centres, John. He played 2 games for New South Wales at centre in 2022, and also scored a try in the 2021 grand final in that position. That was when he was playing for Penrith against Souths in that grand final. So do you have anything to sort of quiz me on there, John?
That's the thing, right? You read out their forward pack. With Max King in the front row. Okay, so their forward pack is super inexperienced.
Yes.
Okay, so the most did you have Sutton in there? Ryan Sutton.
No, I didn't find a spot for Sutton.
Yeah, and so Ryan Sutton is their most capped front row forward.
Yeah.
With 88 games.
Yeah.
Right now, so. They've got a massively inexperienced forward pack. Like they've had massive play. I mean, you've got 6 new players in their squad. Like that's probably their best team.
They've gone very heavy on their utilities, haven't
they? But I don't know. Like the people are putting Crichton at fullback, and there's a lot of people putting Taff on the bench. I'm not really sure he could be a bench utility. I know he's played, like he can apparently play fullback 6 and 7. I don't know if that's the best.
So do you sort of think maybe they should put Sutton in ahead of Taff on the bench there?
Possibly, yeah, because that's sort of they bought Stephen Crichton. He's their big signing, right?
Yes.
And so people are gonna want him playing at fullback because he's their big signing, right? It's reminiscent to me of when Darius Boyd came to the Dragons, actually. The Dragons had previously sucked. Wayne Bennett came on board. He brought his son, Darius Boyd, with him. Darius Boyd, traditionally a centre or winger for Origin. And all of the Dragons fans were like, he's come on big money. He needs to play fullback. All right? He was really good at fullback. And I think he only scored 1 try all year. His first year, something like that. And so Stephen Crichton is the big money signing that the Bulldogs have, and so people are going to want him to play a very important role of fullback. And then, a lot of people are moving Burton back to the centres because that's his junior position, but that leaves your halves.
Yeah, it does. I take your point on that, John, but I just think Burton's going to offer them a lot more in the centres, John. I really do. I mean, he hasn't, to be honest, John, he hasn't really worked for them at 5'8". He hasn't.
No, it's
really,
his kicking is so important.
I mean, you can still use his kicking even though he can still come in and do the bombs and act as a third sort of kicking option there. John, I thought I'd just run through their key in comings and goings.
There's so many. There's more than any other
I've sort of
team.
got it down to the key ones here, John. Yeah. So the key ones are, as we talked about, their big money signing is Stephen Crichton from the Panthers. Connor Tracy, Blake Taff, Jamin Salmon, Josh Curran, Drew Hutchison, Kurt Mann and Jake Turpin. They're the key ins for the Bulldogs. The key outs, Jake Avarillo gone to the Dolphins. That's one that surprised me, John. That's a huge loss. He was one of their best, apart from Adokar, I think he's their best try scorer in the last couple of years. So Tavita Pangai Jr., as we know, retired to take up boxing, John. Paul Alamotti and Corey Waddell also have departed. A couple of injuries to worry about. Connor Tracy, we're hoping that he gets back for round one. He's still back in that calf injury, John. And Carl Oluapu, that gun young half, has a neck injury that's keeping him out indefinitely, John. So hopefully he's okay.
So could Connor Tracy play in the halves?
I don't believe so, John. I think he's more of an outside back. But I think that back five is looking pretty good for them, John, isn't it? Crichton, Adokar, if Burton does play in the centres, Burton, Tracy and Carraz. Yeah, but that's very sharp.
So that's a good...
Yes.
Good back five, but the forwards are really going to... you don't know, they're inexperienced.
So it's a good back five and they've got a lot of utilities.
Yeah, Connor Tracy can play halves.
Okay. Yeah. But they are lacking in the halves, John, and as you say, they are lacking in the engine room.
When he was at Cronulla, I thought his best position was 5'8", actually.
Okay, well, that gives them another option then, doesn't it?
Yeah, he should be back in but... So, I also think Hutchison's best position is at 6, right? He came over from the Roosters, right? And Roosters have got... one of our commenters mentioned that last time that, the Roosters scapegoat their halves a lot. Mitchell Pearce was a scapegoat for... they tend to do it. It doesn't matter who the coach is or anything. Mitchell Pearce was a scapegoat for a lot of their problems with their form. There were other guys since then as well. Now, Luke Keary, who was their wonderkind, is now a scapegoat for them as well. And Hutchison was the big one, the big blame this year. So he was let go... and I reckon his best position is 6. But he's probably the most senior player you have in the halves there. And he's only played 110 games. And he's 28 years old. So he's played 110 games in, a lot of time.
It actually... so, John, we talk about the Bulldogs being weak in the halves. And this has been all too common for the Bulldogs. This has been their main weakness for a long time, John. Now, the Bulldogs haven't had a genuine creative halfback since Brett Kamali retired in 2010. And before him, Brent Sherwin, who led them to that premiership in 2004. Even the years they made the grand final since then, John, Chris Keating was their halfback in the 2012 grand final.
I don't even remember that.
They didn't need a halfback that year, John. If you remember, their forwards were the ball players.
Sam Cassiano, James Graham
and Sam Cassiano were basically the halves as prop forwards that year for the Bulldogs. And obviously Ben Barber and Josh Morris were so hot at that time that they got to the grand final without really needing a halfback. And then 2014... they had Trent Hodkinson as halfback and co-captain in that 2014 grand final. But he wasn't really a creative halfback, John. He was more of a game-managing, sort of overseeing halfback.
Excuse me, he was a State of Origin winner.
If you can believe it, him and Josh Reynolds led New South Wales to that 1 out of 12 Origin win in 2014.
Exactly.
So, look, I like Trent.
No, he was so good.
I'm not having a big go at him, but he wasn't.
He was more the Cooper Cronk style.
Yeah, he wasn't your Brett Kamali or Brent Sherwin creative halfback. He was your game manager, overseeing, making sure the team, ran the right lines, composure sort of halfback. And that everybody's got different styles. He had
you kind of want one of those, and then you want the creative guy. That's more.
But I think we're at a point where we need this creative halfback to come back in for the Bulldogs. It's been a long time. 2010, that's 14 years ago now, John. Toby Sexton doesn't appear to be the long-term solution there, John. And you've talked about that you've heard that there's this mystery halfback that they're chasing.
Yeah, I'd really like to know what's going on.
But they need to go to market to find this mystery halfback you're talking about,
Could be Connor Tracy. He can play half.
I mean, I like Connor Tracy, John, but I really hope it's another candidate that you've got in mind.
So this is the thing, right? They have a back five. The Bulldogs have a back five that is pretty good. Okay, and there's players in it that you talk about, like Stephen Crichton. They also have players like Bronson Sherry that you don't know how good they're going to go. He can play wing, but they have Josh Adokar.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably not going to be in the top 17, assuming everybody's fit, but he'll be someone who, will come into consideration.
And then they've got inexperienced halves, and like I said, the senior half in that group is Hutchinson, who's played 110 games in like 10 years. He's been around for, I think, 8 years. I just looked it up. But it was, so since 2015, he made his debut at St. George Illawarra. So what's that? That's 8 years. He's played 110 games. He's not exactly ever set the world on fire, and that's your senior half. That's your senior spine, actually. You're not going to see a lot of creativity. And then the forwards are so young. Like, young forwards can go either way as well. Like, this is the thing. When you have a youthful, inexperienced forward pack, they can be super creative and they can become those guys that run the lines and get the tries. They can also be, like, really aggressive in defence and aim up really well. Or they can get monstered by, them coming up against, like, a senior forward pack. They could very well get monstered. Or they could try and put on a show and bash the guys. Like, you go back to Josh Papali bashing Paul Gallen once. Like, that was a young, up-and-coming front row forward trying to prove he's the new kid on the block that could dominate the, top prop. They also, one of the things about the Bulldogs is they have the second worst run draw after the Rabbitohs.
I know I sound like a complaining supporter, John, but it seems because they get big TV ratings, they seem to always be put up against the best sides.
Yeah, well, they have 13 matches against the 2023 top 8 teams.
Happens every year, John.
And
every
5 matches against top 4 teams. The teams they're playing twice, though, look, taking off 2023 teams is not the best thing you can do because you don't know what's going to happen next year. But the teams they're playing twice are Raiders, Sharks, Knights, Cowboys, Eels, Dragons, Roosters, Warriors. Now, in that lot, the ones I see as really big dangers are Roosters, Warriors, and Eels. Okay. I'm actually expecting a big drop by the Raiders and possibly the Knights, so that changes the whole draw. Like 2023 finalists playing twice, but then
I'm still worried about the Dolphins too, just quietly. But anyway,
they have the good thing is though the benefits they have is they have no 5-day turnarounds the whole year, which is that's an amazing thing. Like that's really good.
That will help.
And they also only play the Panthers, Storm, and Broncos once, which is really good. Their opening 6 rounds is going to tell you everything about their club. Okay, their things. They've got Eels and Sharks away, then their first home game with the Titans, then Rabbitohs away, Roosters at home, and Storm away. So they have to play the Rabbitohs, who are meant to go really good, expected to go really good this year with a fit Latrell, Roosters, who are the Roosters, the Storm, who are the Storm, last year top 8 Sharks, and the Eels, who are meant to be a powerhouse team, all in the opening 6 rounds. And they have 4 away games as well. So the opening 6 rounds is really going to actually tell you whether those forwards can aim up and whether their halves can actually get the forwards moving forward and the backs to score. Because they've got a lot of points in the back. That's the thing. They got a lot. Yeah. It's going to come down to whether their forwards can aim up in defence and whether the halves can create.
Yes.
That's really cliche.
But it has been a huge issue for them.
It's not like I'm going to go, when we get to the Roosters, it's going to come down to whether their forwards can aim up because the Roosters forward pack is, and whether their halves can create. But
we're saying it's an issue because it's an issue.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an ongoing issue.
Like I said, you can't fit Ryan Sutton in your
my 17. He didn't quite get
and he is the most experienced front row forward in the whole squad with just 88 games.
Yeah. There's always injuries, John. I'm sure he'll play his part. Yeah, I'm sure Bronson Cherry will get an opportunity at some stage.
How many games has Max King played?
So I had his stats there: 107 run meters and 36 tackles a game last season. But I don't have how many games he's played in front of me.
He has played 97 full games, but not always in the front row forward. So so that's the thing. Ryan Sutton's played the most games in the front row. I think Max King was 81 in the front row. So it is gonna be difficult for them to come anywhere, and I think it's really gonna come down to those first 6 games. They do well in that first 6 rounds. They don't necessarily have to win the hard ones like the Storm and the Roosters, but again, I can harken you back to the Dragons. I think it was in 2009 they opened up against Melbourne, and the Dragons had sucked for years. 2009 they opened up against Melbourne, got beat, and I think it was 17-16 was the score, and Greg Inglis manhandled Jamie Sow. It was embarrassing, but they put it to Melbourne. They lost, but they put it to Melbourne, and every single Dragons fan at that stage went, "Oh, this is going to be a good year." You know, and that's what you see when they open up against the Eels. If they do really well, cool. But when they hit those Roosters and Storm games, that's when you're going to actually see what the Bulldogs are made of this year.
Okay, John, do you mind if I turn this discussion to the head honchos at the club?
Phil Gould.
So Phil Gould joined the Bulldogs as general manager of football in July 2021. The club won the spoon that year, but we're not going to be unfair and hold that against him, John. That'd be ridiculous. So we're going to disregard that. 2022, that's his first full season at the club. They finished 12th. 2023, they finished 15th. So if we say 2022 was year one for him, 2024 is year three. He can keep talking about the lower grade success all he wants, but some stage the first grade team needs to get results, John. If they bomb out this year, will Gould be sacked? Will he be facing the axe? I mean,
I think it depends on how they bomb out, actually. Because like if
there's no improvement, if it's a repeat, if it's a third,
if they're a team, because they scored a lot of points at the back end of the season this year, but they also let in a lot of points, and I think the stats were things like they let in the most points and stuff like that. They had really terrible stats. If they bomb out and have those kind of stats again, then it could very well be the end of Phil Gould as general manager of football.
You've talked about in the past people in those positions. Year three is a big year.
Yeah. I just really like I think their recruitment is, if their recruitment lets them down.
It's curious. Yeah. It's strange.
I know Cameron Ciraldo is in a lot of charges, but obviously Phil Gould is involved a lot, and their recruitment is strange, and they haven't recruited any experienced front So Kickow is obviously their forward leader. He didn't play last year very much because of injury. Yeah. You're gonna hope that he brings the guys up around him. Guys like Max King, what's the guy? Toby Sexton.
He's the halfback. Yep.
Yeah. No, what's the blonde guy? The mullet guy. I can
never. About Jacob Preston.
Yeah, that's him. Jacob Preston. See, Sexton Preston. Bringing Preston because Preston was impressive all year. You know, he won all the awards at the Bulldogs award night. And if Kickow can bring the forward pack up, it'll all prove to be a masterstroke. But and the recruitment is so weird.
And Cameron Ciraldo, John, third last in his first season. If he has another bomb out year like that, could be under some serious pressure.
Yeah, I hope not. I think they should give him an extra year. I think they should count this year as his first year. From the management standpoint, obviously statistically you can't, but from a management standpoint, he's recruited his team that he wants with all the weird recruitment. He's had his off season. He's let go of a lot of players. It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players let go. He's foolishly let go of Kyle Flanagan, who's going to be the star signing for the Dragons. But, I think they should count this year as his first year and then next year is whatever. If he does super well this year and then collapses next year, then it all starts again. But I think they should totally discount Cameron Ciraldo's this year. Totally discount it.
At some stage for Gould and Ciraldo, the discounting will stop.
Yeah, exactly.
They will be held.
Cameron Ciraldo's got 2 more years. I think Phil Gould. This is Phil Gould's last year. Because no matter how, like you said, no matter how much they do well in the bottom, I think the fans accept it for a while.
You can talk about the lower grades all you want, and that's great. But at some stage, you need to see results in first grade because in reality, John, most people only care about first grade.
Exactly.
So I guess if we're looking at where they will finish. So to summarise, John, they got a bunch of hard-working, honest recruits, along with, of course, the superstar that is Stephen Crichton.
Yep.
So on paper, they got a good back five, lacking in the halves, as we've mentioned, and they're light on in the engine room, as we've talked about. I think these new recruits will bring a good attitude, and it will have an impact. There's a lot of talk about the poor culture at the club. It won't be enough to get them in the 8, though, John, in my view. I've got them moving up from number 15 to number 12 on the ladder in 2024.
I'm going to note that down. So mine, I feel basically the same way. Like I said, I think the first 6 rounds will tell us a lot, but my finish for the Bulldogs next year is 11th.
Yeah, okay. So you're on one spot.
I think they're no longer going to be fighting for the wooden spoon. Out of those Tigers, Dragons, and Bulldogs, I know I said like the Tigers look like they've got the best chance, but I honestly think just based on, Cameron Serrata versus Benji Marshall, I think Bulldogs actually have more of a chance of avoiding that fighting for the wooden spoon than the Tigers do.
So if they finish 11th in a 17-team comp, John, you're probably looking at a team that wins about maybe 9 or 10 games, as opposed to a team that won 7 games this year. So I think if they can do that, if they can win 9 or 10 and move up to about 11 or 12 like we're talking about, that's probably enough for Gould and Serraldo to survive without issue.
One more year.
But if it's 15th again, John, or worse than 15th, bottom 3, there's massive red alert signs for those two at the end of the season.
11th. Oh, so 11th and 12th actually were Cowboys and Sea Eagles this year, and it was 12 and 11 wins.
Right, okay.
So, man, you get 12 or 11 wins,
Oh, yeah, well, if they do that.
Bulldogs fans are going to have a party.
Well, that'll be a huge improvement, and that's what we need to see at this point.
So that's it for the Bulldogs. That's it for Honestly, guys. It's just our opinion. Next week, we'll be hammering the Titans. Well, discussing the Titans, the team that's cared about least in the NRL. Sorry, Titans fans.